Every master understands the initial plays decide the outcome. The outcome, not the showy maneuvers, not the bold risks that make audiences marvel. Never. It's those early silent plays, the ones no one recalls, the ones that appear normal, plain, unremarkable. That's where kingdoms are claimed or destroyed, and you grasped this before anyone showed you. 10 years back, you made your initial play. You entered onto the stage they dominated, and you did something that shifted reality. You positioned your most valuable asset, your intellect, and you masked it as nothing. You entered into their match, appearing uncertain, appearing lost, appearing like someone who required guidance just to locate the restroom. And they accepted it. Oh yes, they accepted it so completely. It became their reality. They dismissed you in the opening 5 minutes, labeled you under insignificant, classified you as not a danger, and that was your initial triumph. That was the play they never noticed, because while they were occupied celebrating their apparent dominance, you were already 3 plays forward, charting the complete stage in quietness. Look, most individuals broadcast themselves. They enter spaces hungry to demonstrate they fit. They talk forcefully. They mention names. They display achievements like armor against their own doubt. And these influential individuals, these rulers and leaders who believed they possessed the stage, they were conditioned to search for those indicators. They were conditioned to recognize rivals by their volume. But you created no volume. You posed basic inquiries. Inquiries that made them grin. Inquiries that made them share looks like, "Can you imagine this person?" You said wrong words you understood flawlessly. You acted to battle with ideas you'd conquered years before. You allowed them to clarify things to you carefully, thoroughly, patronizingly. And each single time you weren't absorbing from them, you were absorbing them. Their behaviors, their weak areas, their doubts wrapped up as strength. The manner they showed plans when they believed no one significant was paying attention. The manner they lowered their protection around you because you were decoration, ambient presence, a secondary figure in their narrative. But here's what they failed to grasp about chess. Pawns transform into queens, and you were never a pawn. You were a queen acting like a pawn, anticipating for the ideal instant to show them what you truly are. The beginning continued years. Years of suppressing dignity, years of restraining your words until it hurt, years of observing them advance in competence while you remained in the space they gave you. They believed they were being kind, allowing you to remain on the stage at all. They believed your presence was their compassion. They had no clue your presence was your approach. Every gathering where you remained silent, data collecting, every task where you allowed them to claim recognition, arranging every instant they dismissed you, another asset positioned into location while they weren't observing. You were constructing something they couldn't perceive because they declined to notice. Their pride was your disguise. Their self-importance was your concealment shield. And the perfect aspect about acting unintelligent. They instruct you on everything. They reveal their methods because they believe you can't grasp them. They expose their vulnerabilities because they believe you're too foolish to use them. They provide you the map to their downfall and label it guidance. You recorded notes they'll never discover. Brain notes, inner notes, every demeaning remark filed, every authority move recorded, every partnership charted, every conflict monitored, every secret found. You created a collection on them while they believed you were fighting to stay current. The beginning plays are finished. The stage is arranged, and they still don't realize the match has already started. This is where novices fail. The center match, that turbulent whirl of exchanges and maneuvers, where most competitors become sentimental, become impulsive, become frantic. But not you, never you, the center match continued the most. half a decade of tactical patience that would shatter normal individuals. You observed them climb. You observed them mark victories that should have belonged to you. You observed them construct kingdoms on bases you assisted create while they acted you weren't there. And you permitted them. That's the element that would break most individuals. The permitting them. The remaining motionless while they take victory circles. The grinning while they receive recognition for concepts you suggested, but you grasped something they never will. This center match isn't about claiming fights. It's about arranging for the final match. It's about giving up assets that don't count. So your critical assets arrive precisely where they must be. So you gave up. You gave up acknowledgement. You gave up recognition. You gave up the instant satisfaction of showing them incorrect. You permitted them to believe they were succeeding because their incorrect assurance was your strongest tool. They became relaxed. That's what occurs when you believe you've already succeeded. They ceased observing the stage. They ceased measuring dangers. They began creating messy plays, reckless plays, plays powered by self-importance instead of tactics. And every messy play they created, you recorded. Every reckless statement they uttered, you preserved. Every time they showed more than they ought to have, because it's only them they don't grasp anyway. You stored it away. You became the guardian of information you never requested. They shared you matters they'd never share their peers because you weren't their peer. You were beneath regard, and that role, that unseen role, provided you entry to everything. Meeting secrets, private agreements, the actual discussions that occur when influential individuals believe no observers count. But you counted, you always counted, they simply couldn't perceive it. The center match demanded losses that stung. There were evenings you doubted everything, evenings where the disguise felt too burdensome, evenings where you desired to overturn the stage, show yourself, allow them to perceive what they'd been overlooking all these years. The urge to demonstrate yourself was persistent, that intense desire to be perceived, to be recognized, to be honored. But you maintained the position because you grasped that early exposure is destruction on the board. You grasped that showing your queen too soon gets her taken. You grasped that patience isn't inactive. It's the most forceful form of tactics. Every day you didn't show yourself was another day they created their own traps deeper. And they created perfectly. And they created opponents believing they were immune. They destroyed connections believing they'd never require to return. They gathered obligations they believed they'd never have to settle. And through it all, you observed. You anticipated. You arranged your assets with careful accuracy while they celebrated in their structure of dust. The center match taught you something about authority. Genuine authority isn't noisy. Genuine authority doesn't broadcast itself. Genuine authority acts in silence, constructs in shadows, attacks from directions that shouldn't be possible. They possessed the image of authority, the positions, the wealth, the sway, but you were constructing real authority. The type that doesn't require a label, the type that functions whether anyone perceives it or not. They believed the match was about dominating the middle of the stage. You understood the match was about dominating intelligence, and you possessed all of it? Every piece of advantage, every hidden partnership, every difference between what they stated openly and what they did secretly. You were positioned on a mountain of weapons, and they continued providing you more. Sometimes they'd challenge you. Not knowingly, they still believed you were safe. But sometimes they'd present something your direction that demanded more capability than your disguise permitted. And you'd mishandle it intentionally. You'd fumble just enough to preserve the appearance. You'd pose a foolish continuation inquiry. You'd allow your gaze to become empty at exactly the correct instant. Performing unintelligent is tiring work. It demands more capability than being intelligent because you must perpetually determine what an unintelligent individual would do, what an unintelligent individual would state, what an unintelligent individual would overlook. You must suppress every impulse that desires to resolve the issue, respond the inquiry, reveal the mistake in their reasoning. But the exhaustion was an asset. Every portion of strength spent preserving the disguise was a contribution into an account they didn't realize existed, and that account was gathering returns, growing returns, the type that converts modest benefits into crushing strength over time. 5 years of center match. 5 years of observing and anticipating. 5 years of being the individual they never concerned about, while they demolished each other pursuing for roles that wouldn't count when the final match came. And you could sense it approaching, that change in the atmosphere, that delicate shift in the stage arrangement, the instant when all your patient arranging would eventually reward, the instant when the disguise could eventually drop. The final match was nearing, and they still had no notion. Someone influential just understood, not guessed, not questioned, understood. The type of understanding that makes your circulation cease flowing. The type that replays every exchange, every discussion, every instant they believed they were alone with their plans. The type that makes you doubt your complete grasp of truth. It occurred lately. Perhaps yesterday, perhaps an hour back. Perhaps they're examining something right now that eventually linked the pieces. And the image developing in their brain is destroying everything they believed they understood about you, about themselves, about this match they believed they were claiming. The final match is here, and they just understood they never had a possibility. How did it occur? Does it count? Perhaps someone revealed. Perhaps they eventually recognized a sequence. Perhaps they witnessed you perform something you shouldn't have understood how to perform, and the disguise slipped for just a moment. Perhaps they discovered something you constructed in the darkness. Perhaps they eventually asked themselves an inquiry they'd been ignoring for years. What if we were incorrect about them? And once that inquiry establishes itself, it consumes everything. They are returning now, intellectually retracing. Every gathering where you remained quiet, were you collecting intelligence? Every error you created, was it planned? Every time you requested for assistance, were you examining them? Every chance you declined, did you decline it intentionally? The fear is wonderful, isn't it? Observe them spiral. Observe them doubt recollections they were positive about. Observe them understand that the individual they ignored, disregarded, dismissed, and insulted for over a decade was observing them back and recording notes and anticipating. This is defeat in gradual motion. The ruler doesn't collapse all at once. First arrives the understanding that every escape path is sealed. Then arrives the frantic searching for plays that don't exist. Then arrives the surrender. The terrible, degrading surrender that the match was finished long before they realized it was being conducted. And you're just positioned there. Same location you've always been in. Same look you've always displayed. But now they perceive it differently. Now that empty gaze appears planned. Now that modest stance appears like contained strength. Now every safe thing about you appears like disguise concealing something deadly. They desire to challenge you. They're burning to request answers. Who are you truly? What do you understand? What have you been performing all these years? But they cannot, because challenging you means confessing they were deceived. It means recognizing that someone they regarded beneath them defeated them on every dimension. Their dignity won't permit it, so they must remain with it, accept it, suffocate on inquiries they can't pose, and you don't need to speak a statement. That's the excellence of the final match. You don't require to clarify yourself. You don't require to show your tactics. You don't require to boast or teach or demonstrate anything. The arrangement speaks for itself. The stage speaks for itself. They can perceive now what they should have perceived a decade back. They were never in command. Some of them will attempt to rescue something. They'll suddenly desire to be your companion. They'll recall old kindnesses they created on the moment. They'll behave like they always understood you were exceptional, always perceived your capability, always trusted in you. Allow them perform, allow them disgrace themselves with altered history. You understand the reality. They understand you understand, and that understanding is a weapon they'll sense every time they perceive you. Others will take the reverse direction. They'll attempt to undermine you before you can utilize what you understand. They'll distribute rumors, insert uncertainties, portray you as erratic or fraudulent or hazardous. Allow them. The more sound they create, the more apparent their terror becomes. The more they assault, the more they verify that you possess something worth assaulting. Their panic is your confirmation. But most of them, the intelligent ones, the ones who have endured this long by interpreting circumstances accurately, they'll become quiet. They'll observe you the manner you observed them. They'll anticipate to perceive what you perform next. They'll reassess every belief they've ever created about authority, about capability, about the silent ones in the space who never appeared like a danger. You've transformed their truth, not with a presentation, not with a challenge, not with any theatrical exposure. You transformed it by simply being as something different than what they determined you were. You transformed it by being patient when everyone else was hurrying. You transformed it by conducting a longer match than they understood existed. And now they must exist in a reality where you're not who they believed, where their assessment disappointed them, where their valued capability overlooked the most significant competitor on stage. The finest defeats are silent, no audiences applauding, no prizes lifted, just the silent sound of the ultimate asset shifting into arrangement, and the gentle release of someone who understands it's finished. That's where you are now, positioned over a stage they didn't realize they'd finished, observing them pursue for plays that don't exist. You don't require to broadcast your triumph. You don't require to clarify your tactics. You don't require them to recognize what occurred. The arrangement is evident. The match is determined, and every moment they invest attempting to determine what went incorrect is another moment they're not investing on restoration. You performed Unintelligent for over a decade. You received their condescension like energy. You transformed their disrespect into drive. You converted their blindness into your concealment and shifted through their reality, taking everything you required while they believed you were recording notes you couldn't grasp. And now someone influential understands. Now the rumors are beginning. Now the cautious ones are reevaluating. Now the throne they constructed on the belief of your insignificance is trembling beneath them because that belief was the base. They desired to maintain you minor. They desired you thankful for whatever fragments they threw. They desired you reliant on their acceptance, their entry, their definition of your value. But you were never reliant. You were never minor. You were a queen masked as a pawn, and they invested a decade instructing you how to overcome them. What occurs now, whatever you determine, that's the arrangement you've claimed. That's the liberty a decade of control bought. You can show everything or show nothing. You can utilize what you understand or allow them question forever. You can construct something they can't reach, or simply observe them demolish each other now that terror has substituted their assurance. The stage is yours. The match was always yours. They just didn't realize they were competing.